Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Syed Ali, who is the head of Cyber GRC and assurance at Tonomus NEOM. Syed is a veteran in the fields of cybersecurity, GRC, assurance, risk management, and internal audit. And he is working across Gulf Cooperation Council countries and UK. He has worked with large enterprise, advising senior leadership on cybersecurity and on board members as well. He is working currently as part of Tonomus NEOM company, which is, I know, is a great futuristic city. So you will explain us later, creating the most cutting-edge approaches for cognitive GRC and assurance practices needed for a visionary city of the future that is NEOM. So, Syed, thank you for joining us today for this podcast interview.
Thank you, Boris, for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure as well. So I believe that we will have a very thoughtful conversation on the topic of cognitive GRC, business content automation, building in AI assurance practices with some actionable tips. So first of all, Syed, could you please tell us a short story about yourself, your career path, what brought you to where you are right now, and what you guys and with your company are up to these days?
Thank you, Boris. And I'll just make it very quick in terms of short history. I started my career in the UK, where I worked for companies like British Standards Institute. I was one of the first ISO 27001 assessors who transitioned customers from 7799. Back in the day when cybersecurity was known as information security primarily. I then worked as a technology audit lead and manager for many, big banks like Bank of New York Mellon. And over there, obviously, we had a lot of focus on cybersecurity and the practices that were evolving at that time. Bank of New York Mellon, Royal Bank of Scotland. I then had the opportunity to join a leading telecom in the Middle East, which was Mobile, based in KSA. I was there for many years. After that, I joined Do Telecoms in Dubai, where I was leading a technology audit practice, focusing on, obviously, telco networks, IT applications, and cybersecurity. I then transitioned into a role leading a GRC, Cyber GRC and assurance practice within Do Telecoms, where I used to run the entire governance, risk management, compliance, and also the pen testing and PCI DSS type of activities. Did that for many years. Then I joined STC Group as senior advisor to the CISO of STC, where we had STC is a very large group in KSA, which has many subsidiaries in the fintech space, in addition to its core telco business. So got a chance to really grow my knowledge base in cybersecurity with a lot of emerging technologies, including cloud and all those IoT type of technologies that are part of the STC Group. Around 7 months ago, I had the opportunity to join Tonomus in NEOM, which is, as you know, NEOM is a futuristic city that we're building, which is very technology laden, very cognitive in nature. So a lot of AI and ML that's being produced. And I'm getting really a great opportunity to be part of this journey where we actually are evolving the very nature of how we live in cities and how we exist and how we work and how we play. Just as a disclaimer, these are my personal opinions and not the opinions of my existing or previous employers. Thank you, Boris.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So it's very nice to hear your opinion. I never spoke yet with a person who works in the NEOM futuristic city. And of course, I know about this project, so it will be great to hear your opinion. So, Syed, first, can you explain what is cognitive GRC is and how it differs from traditional GRC practices?
So let me give you a few examples there, Horace, and I'll tell you the reason for it, because, the word cognitive as a buzzword has been used by a lot of people. What does it mean? It was first automation, then it was RPA, now it's cognitive. What does it really mean, right? So let me just explain to you the problem set. And again, my views are of a legacy organization. I know a lot of organizations are in far advanced state. So this is just to give you a differential. So take a policy, for example. Right now, what does a user do? If you're a user in IT, you would pick up a cyber policy. This is going to be probably a 300-page document about if you're looking at access control. You are going to basically try and find the sections that apply to you, and you may get help from your cyber team just to advise you in that capacity. But it's a very difficult manual process and doesn't work in the age of our IT, which is all about CI/CD pipelines, delivering products on the fly, AI, ML, evolving, learning, and delivering products and services. So Cyber GRC essentially does not, in the legacy form of shape, does not actually address the needs for such a work. So a lot of different things that we're doing in terms of, so I'll just give you some broad things. Policies as specific, customized, product-centric policies and service-centric policies as opposed to, generic policies. So I'll give you an example. In our organization, we obviously are dealing with a whole range of technologies. There is 5G networks, there is IoT networks being deployed, there is AI products that are being, deployed and launched as we speak. All these people, if you give them a generic set of policy documents, cyber policy documents, they're going to get lost. They're going to think of cyber as a blocker. So how we evolve existing GRC practices is that we first of all define a very customized set of product-centric cyber policies, right? These policies and standards then become, the way we are building it, they become almost, the term that you would have heard many times, shift left, right? So we are shifting our policies left, which is that I want this policy, the cyber policies that we build for our product teams to become the DNA of how they operate cyber and security and how they think of it. It doesn't have to be a separate standalone document. It's something that's embedded in their SOPs. It's something that we actually then move to automation, because obviously a lot of policy and compliance obligations are drawn from it, which are specific, which are clear to these owners, and they can actually embed it into their processes. The next stage of cognition arrives at automation. So there are 3 layers, as you know, Boris, in every control, language that we speak. There is the process, there is a technology, and there is the people, right? So because we have such an automation and workflow-centric systems that we are building by the very nature of them, what we are doing is we are essentially embedding as much automation as we possibly can in the technology layers and the process layers, right? So this, I'll give you an example, would be cloud. So most of our products are sitting on virtual machines. We are actually checking the infrastructure level compliance obligations on these. We can get an automated compliance posture. That's what we're building. And we can integrate that with live and real-time compliance of this infrastructure and applications and the process layers. Obviously, the people layer is still, something that we need to do through reviews, through assessments, through, sort of training and awareness type of exercise or phishing exercises, and that remains manual. But, this in a cognitive GRC is not a perfectly standalone GRC. It requires a lot of human oversight, and that will never change, in my view. So that's just a very high-level view of cognitive GRC. I hope I'm able to explain very high-level, 50,000 feet view of how we think of this.
Yeah, we will drill down a little bit more practical application.
Sure.
So how can companies use this cognitive technologies such as an AI and machine learning to improve their GRC processes?
So let me explain that in the terms of how we are thinking about it right now. So 2 things that change in cognitive GRC is essentially how we think about risk, how we think about the steps that we perform, risk identification, evaluation, reporting, and all that sort of stuff. So let me give you the example in detail. Very important component of cognitive GRC is business context. We talk about context-driven risk, and usually it is a very esoteric statement. It's understanding, it's manual, it's set in time. What we are talking about in cyber, because of the very nature of how our threats and our vulnerabilities are evolving, literally, what used to be weeks are now days. What used to be days are now hours, right? We have to understand the business context of where these threats and vulnerabilities and weaknesses and compliance gaps actually operated. So I'll maybe illustrate that with an example. If you are running a telco network and you have a RAN site, which is radio access network, and this radio access network in a smart city will be serving, let's say, a hospital which has remote surgery going on. A surgeon is sitting in the US and performing surgery in NEOM, for example. And then at the same time, this radio access network is serving driverless cars buzzing down the highway. So those are all connected to the RAN. So, and then multiple other technologies that may be. So as you can imagine, the context of this particular equipment is important when you are going to make decisions about the security of this particular element. So if in cybersecurity, you would have heard a lot the term zero trust. Now, zero trust is a principle that is being thought of where you isolate the very basic. I'm not going to get into zero trust because that's not the focus of our conversation, but we basically try and isolate the element that is under attack so that we can protect the rest of the network. Now, think about this in terms of this particular radio access network. Remember the two major smart technologies that are relying on this connectivity, the remote surgery that is going on, the driverless cars on the other side. Business context is essentially going to allow us to understand what, after this element is exposed, what can we do about it? Because we don't want to have a safety impact, a human life impact downstream to other technologies. So this is why business context and understanding context in relation to cyber risk is so important. The decisions we make, how we treat our threats, how we treat our vulnerabilities, and more importantly, the actions we take are dependent on the business context. So I hope that example sort of clarifies how we think of business context. Carrying on, if I can just sort of get to the next part of the question, you said, how do you use AI ML? So before I go into that, I've talked about the business context and the need to pick up signals from all the downstream technologies. Now let's come to risk. How is legacy risk management functions operating today? I'm sure there are very good functions out there, but let's just take a random example. In an enterprise organization, you have an application risk assessment, an infrastructure risk assessment, maybe a combined risk assessment, and then risks are identified, and then basically they're mitigated through an entire process of risk management lifecycle, right? This is how we do it today. We may do these risk assessments in a planned calendar approach. So we look at application X, application Y, application Z. We may have infrastructure coverage because we would have limitations on how much money we have, how many resources we have deployed, and the ability for them to perform the work. So let's say the best risk management team doing an extensive cloud plus an application stack review is going to take 2 to 3 weeks. Now I bring you back to this situation here where the RAN site has been exploited and we have all these dependent technologies on it, and we have to make a decision whether we shut this down as to the principle of zero trust. So one of the important components that is needed by zero trust is risk, cyber risk quantification of if we are to shut this down or if this risk is exploited, what is the impact, right? So these two examples basically lead to my answer to AI and ML. Risk is now, and business context as well, is a signal-driven process. If you want to move to real-time risk posture, you need to pick signals from your business context. You need to pick signals from all your threat, vulnerability, your incidents, your DLP events, your SIEM events, which currently today in most even cybersecurity organizations for us are happening in isolation because there is a vulnerability management team. It's sending vulnerabilities to the teams. There is a separate incident management which will produce a report and may share it with risk management. So it's very siloed. What we are trying to do is first of all, we build an ontology of what is business context, what are the specific components we need to pick, and then what is the ontology of risk signals from all these different sources. Once we have the ontology planned out, we then automate the collection of the signals. This is where ML starts to play a role. So we build specific algorithms which goes to source information to try and pick up real life signals. The next stage comes is where we have very dynamic cyber risk quantification. And I use the word dynamic very carefully, Boris, because as you and I know, cyber risk quantification, the application of probability, likelihood, all that stuff is very manual in nature today in risk practices. It's human driven, it's perception driven. No matter how well you have documented your process, the application of it is always, human centric. So what we do then is we apply an entire layer of AI technologies, which is learning and evolving, and we are testing it under human supervision to basically elevate these signals and connect them to a cyber risk quantification which is also dynamic, which is changing. Right? When the business context changes, the impact value changes. Same applies to risk signals. You know, if a threat level increases, that has an impact on the signals as well. So this is where AI ML comes in, and we are now actually building practices to operationalize real-time risk posture. And I can tell you, Boris, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of thinking, it's a lot of discussions with data scientist teams to build the right set of ontologies, to build the right type of CRQ, and then we get to an AI ML-driven, risk-based, business context-driven, posture. So I hope I know I gave a very long answer, but I was able to explain to you how AI ML is helping us in building this cognitive risk or GRC practice.
Yeah, you explained us kind of high level how it works, but how normal organizations which used to work on kind of silos can transform themselves to such complex organizations? Is it visible, or is it require some kind of process?
So Boris, step one for any organization today is very simple. We need to rethink the almost like Genesis level event on our risk organization. Our risk organization is no longer a siloed organization. It's no longer disconnected from the vulnerability management or the pen testers or the, and I'm sticking to the cyber domain, if you allow me, because that's my specialty. And it has to be able to interpret signals coming from all of these elements. It has to move away. So that's step one. Rethinking risk, and rethinking risk as a, you can say, a cyber signal aggregator. It's no longer the responsibility of SIEM organizations to pick things up, have SOC monitoring agents. All of these things happening in isolation in cybersecurity needs to be aggregated through a proper, approach, a framework to be aggregated into the risk team. So that's step one. Next thing, which is very important, is you need automation for this, Boris. I'm not going to name some of the larger GRC platforms. I think we are all using some of the global players in this space, but really very little to almost no AI ML capabilities exist there. And that's the problem for us, because we need a strong automation platform. So what we are doing, Boris, on that regards is working with some partners who we believe are, these are startup organizations, which has a very cognitive roadmap aligned to, and we are driving their roadmap, product roadmap, into how we pick this signal-based automation into our platform. Obviously, it requires creation of AI/ML techniques like graph DBs and ontologies, and also obviously data lakes where we collect all these signals and so on and so forth. But it's needed. It's the step two. After you define the framework to rethink your risk, step two is finding the right partner who will help you build the cognitive GRC method. And then step three is basically thinking of risk as an enricher to everyone. So when I have a business context, a working business context as a GRC lead, when I have a real-time risk posture, imagine providing that information back to my cyber functions, an incident team, which can understand the impact and the priority of a particular technology, application, or infrastructure under attack, has a different level of response to it. Right now, it's siloed, but in the future, we can actually provide this service back to the teams. So it's we use the word, Boris, again and again, risk-based. What is risk-based? If it's not being enriched by risk, it's not risk-based, it's siloed. So I think these are the three broad steps that I'm taking, Boris, that we are taking as an organization. And frankly, we are finding a lot of success in step one and step two.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So we hear a lot of, in context of AI, ML, ethical practices. So can you discuss how AI assurance practices can help companies ensure that the AI systems are aligned with their business objectives and are operating ethically?
Excellent question, and this allows me to switch to the other side. I've been talking about how organizations are using AI/ML to enrich their processes and build these fantastic cognitive products. The other side of it, Boris, which you quite rightly highlighted, is there is an entire new set of attack vectors that are targeting AI and ML products and services. These are AI adversarial attacks. And if I give you some numbers, one of the researches that I read, in 2014, there were, let's say, 100 plus adversarial attack techniques on AI techniques. And let me give you an example of this, what I mean by adversarial attacks. You have chatbots. If you have a lot of chatbots in the world right now that you can actually interact with, and they will respond to your questions, provide you information, data, because they are coming and they're collecting
ChatGPT, I know.
ChatGPT is a great one, right? So basically there are, so let me give you the example that we are focused on, obviously, as well, which is, voice chatbots, a chatbot persona that you can see on screen and interact with you by analyzing your voice, listening to your questions, and responding back to you. There are new audio psychoacoustic techniques that have been deployed, which can actually, when a person is talking, a non-human audible sound file can be embedded, which is created to basically attack the very processing capability of this AI persona. So what you can get is, instead of getting a proper response back, the AI algorithm drifts towards giving you negative responses. It could be geopolitical in nature. It could be religiously offending you, or it could actually start swearing at you. You know what I mean? So these are the kind of attacks that are now visibly available in the public. Another great attack, Boris, that I'll talk about, which is quite common, is, one of the biggest user of AI ML technologies today is image processing, CCTV, streaming data, so on and so forth. So there is a lot of, bifurcations and adversarial attacks that are created where a person can wear a shirt which has an image on it, which basically confuses the AI ML algorithm processing the streaming data. And that person then becomes invisible. It's called invisibility cloak attacks, and you'll find a lot of videos on that on YouTube as well. So for this adversarial attacks, the impact and risk is that in a highly sensitive, and we are living in a very geopolitically sensitive world today, right, Boris? So in a highly sensitive world where, a security function is using CCTV image processing to collate this data, an attacker, a malicious person, a terrorist can walk through the CCTV streaming data completely invisible and carry out an attack. I'm just giving you some ideas of what kind of AI attacks that we're seeing. Just in terms of numbers, some companies from GPT-1 to GPT-3, they're saying it's almost 2,000% increase in basically, the type of adversarial attacks. I think in my last review of this, because we're obviously building an assurance practice AI, we call it responsible AI. It's 8,000 to 10,000 known and published adversarial attack techniques out there. So how do you work on this? Two of my references that I'm working on in terms of building, because we have a lot of AI ML products and we want, as to have trusted and responsible AI out there, which people can use and know that it's going to be trusted completely. So two of the main things that I'm using right now are, first of all, a great European standard that I recommend all of your listeners to go through, which is the ALTI framework. ALTI framework essentially builds 7-pillar strategy to how you should treat any particular AI model. These include human agency and oversight, technical robustness and safety, privacy and data governance, transparency, diversity and non-discrimination, fairness, societal environmental well-being, and accountability. Now, you'll ask me, Boris, that why, as a cyber person, am I interested in things like transparency and bias and all those type of issues? What I've realized through our research is that cyber, because this is a technology-based play, cyber has to lead the role in addressing not just cybersecurity, which is data poisoning attacks, as the adversarial attacks that I talked about, but in all of the principles, because we need to aggregate it. Because if we are launching products in AI and ML, and they're not addressing some of the human bias or discrimination or transparency type of rules, we are going to essentially end up with a product that is not trusted. And therefore, we are playing a leading role in that and establishing a practice for responsible AI.
All right, fantastic. So if we summarize it, back to your kind of ethical, I heard in the news that there were an attack because now in the war in Ukraine, Russia, some Russian hackers created image of President Zelensky, and he is talking head, and he as if he tell to his troop to surrender. That was in the beginning of the war. Yeah, yeah.
And they're getting very, very, basically, you've seen some of the videos, Tom Cruise videos, we've all seen them. They're getting very sophisticated. It's going to increase with time, especially when it comes to companies. So imagine phishing emails for your CEO. It will change to actual video calls from your CEO, which are completely spoofed, right? So we're getting to that age.
Scareful, yeah, scary.
It's very scary, yes. But scary, but having said that, we can do it. And sorry, I forgot to mention the second thing that I use apart from Altai Matrix. In cybersecurity, there is a Atlas matrix, which is almost an equivalent of what we used to have we still have for legacy cybersecurity, IT network type, which is, if you remember the Mitre attack, same to that, we have Atlas matrix, which basically looks at the entire life cycle of the AI ML model building, from model building to data testing, QA, in production, and retirement. And there are attack techniques against each of these that are actually listed out in the Atlas matrix, which we are trying to automate and test all the AI ML products that we release. So these are just some steps that we can take. AI, I know when people start talking about AI, they feel it's very complex. How do we start? Where do we need data scientists? But really, there are some great NIST-based, Altai-based, a lot of bodies that are working on it. And it's just about setting a frame marker, creating a framework, and then start creating the necessary actions to build on it. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And it's a very exciting area, Boris, and we can have an entire session just on that.
Yeah, maybe we'll do another session. Maybe just to summarize, we have about 3 minutes now. If someone who is listening to this interview would like to walk away with 1 or 2 major takeaways, what would that be?
Number one, rethink how you practice risk management in the cyber area. Cognitive GRC is no longer a future state or a buzzword. It is real. It can be done, and people are trying to do it. So to risk leaders out there who are operating, especially in the critical areas like cyber, take that as a direction, and you can get there. That's what we are proving up on a day-to-day basis. Second thing, AI ML. We are only looking at how cool it is and what it can do for us. As cyber folks and as security and risk folks, start thinking about the adversarial attacks on AI, because tomorrow, when your organizations shift towards utilizing these AI ML algorithms or personas, they will be attacked. And if you haven't inbuilt a proper framework to address some of the weaknesses that are coming up, the data drift, the model drift, and the poisoning attacks and all those type of things, you will struggle at that stage. So those are the 2 key takeaways, Boris. Thank you for asking that question.
All right, thank you, Syed. It was very useful, and to know more about this cutting edge concept and the technique. So I hope we will talk more about about this with you, or maybe your colleagues, about this topic, and also smart cities whenever discussed on our program as well. So thank you again. I wish you a success. Just maybe a last question, because if I forgot something important to ask you that you would like to add, you have about 1-2 minutes to add it if you want.
No, I just want to, not really a question, just a comment, Boris. Forums that you have created are extremely important for us to have conversations on. That's why I always love hearing experts coming on your show, the meaningful and insightful conversations that you have, because as we rethink risk, it's not going to be one person or one team that leads that. It's going to be the entire risk community coming together to take us all forward. And really, having said that, I would like through your forum to say, let's have this conversation on an ongoing basis. Let's use your forum to continuously talk about this, evolve ourselves. We're all humans at the end, and we are trying to address risks as they're evolving. So working together through platforms such as yours is the way forward. And I really thank you for all the efforts that you put in.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish you great success.
Thank you. Thank you, Boris.